Good evening, viewers, and welcome back to Prime Live. The Electoral Reform Consultation Panel is inviting members of the public, including political parties or prospective independent candidates, to make written submission for its consideration on proposals for an electoral system for the National Assembly as well as the provincial legislatures. Now, the submissions must address why, how, and whether the current South African electoral system should be reformed or changed or maybe even replaced. Now, the panel was formed after the promulgation of the Electoral Amendment Act in June last year and has 1 year to produce a report to Parliament. We are going to be joined by Advocate Richard Sizani, who is the chairperson of the panel that includes academics, election administrators, as well as public service expert. He joins us now. Good evening, Council, and thank you so much for joining us on Prime Live.
Thank you very much. I appreciate for inviting me. And good evening to the South Africans.
Thank you so much for your time and your expertise to talk to us about this very important topic. We know that the panel was formed after the Electoral Amendment Act was actually passed in 2023. And we were told that the panel you lead will probably result in some changes in South Africa's electoral laws. Is the panel expecting any major fundamental changes, or will it be some smaller changes over a period of time?
Well, we really don't know what we expect, but what we're aware of is that when the issue of in 2021, when the issue of independence that must join the electoral path also was discussed in Parliament, in most public hearings that were held by Parliament, there was a call to change our system, to relook our system, and they felt that, for instance, just to amend that legislation to include only independence in the elections of 2024 was not sufficient. So we are set up now to actually test that by researching and actually consulting South Africans, political parties, individuals, and also civil society unions and others to tell us clearly whether they think there's cause now after 30 years to change our electoral system, replace it, or even amend it.
Now, if we look at what has already changed since 2023 amendments to our voting laws, independents can actually run in the general election now. However, they are limited to just one seat in the National Assembly. Now, there was some complaints that independents are actually at a disadvantage. Could this be an example of what people can submit proposals on regarding to the panel?
Exactly, because it's clear that some independents and some people have suggested that the regional seats that were allocated to allow independence were as big as a province, and therefore it was unfair for them to come through, and therefore it took a long time. It made it impossible, for instance, for them to come through. So there is still a feeling by some that in the proportional representation that involves other political parties nationally, independents must be given a chance to stand and be counted there. So there is a big drive for independents to have a different dispensation.
Now, are you able to share some of the criteria that the panel will be using for evaluating any proposals that are made for the actual South African electoral system?
Yes, there will be some guiding principles that we will be using to actually judge our system. One of our requirements in terms of the constitutional values of our constitution is that we must maintain a multi-party system of democracy. We will ensure that we have a system that is like that. It's one of the requirements that, of course, our system must promote accountability. It must promote, it must be simple for ordinary people also to be able to use it. It must have integrity. And therefore, those are some of the tests that will make, and again, it must actually be operational. It must be easy to run it, because if it's electoral system that requires 30 ballots like it has happened in Congo, it's not going to work. So we're trying to simplify it and make it work.
Now, when it comes to the modalities, what are the actual modalities for tendering a submission, and when is the closing date?
The closing date is on the 30th of September, but we are continuing also into public hearings. So although the closing date for the submission is 30th, but really it's just an indicative one, because we are moving to also public hearings immediately in October. And our closing date now is 30th of September. People can deliver these in our offices at Home Affairs in Arcadia. There's also an email that is attached to our call for submissions, which they can use, which is an email of the Electoral Reform Consultation Panel.
Now, are there any plans when it comes to the public in terms of public submissions for those who are not necessarily able to write in?
Well, the plans we have are the ones of hearings, that we are going to come to places and here we're going to work with the legislatures, provincial legislatures, national legislatures, to see areas where we can go and listen to people and also talk to them, and also hope also some of the civil society organizations we are working with, that they would actually also reach and submit things on our behalf. But we'll try as possible, even the traditional South African meetings of Bosperat, Mahutla, Imbizo, we will try them in rural areas and also in urban areas. So we will.
And let's talk a little bit more about the report. When a report is produced after the period that is in question, what is then the next step and what happens thereafter?
What we are required to do, this report is supposed to create a legal system, an electoral system for 2029 elections. One of the things that is interesting about this is that we are not asked by Parliament to actually choose a system ourselves. We are asked to give them options, 4 or 5 options. But what they require is that we must actually test what are the advantages and the disadvantages of each system. We must also test what are the financial implications of each model we recommend. We must also test whether it is constitutional or not constitutional, and then bring those to them on the 28th of May, 2025. We are supposed to submit them to the Minister of Home Affairs. The Minister has 30 days to look at them, and then he must table that in Parliament in 30 days. Then beyond that, we think that then Parliament might choose a system, and if they choose a system, then they will go into legislation to amend the 1998 legislation.
Now, Council, regarding these submissions that are open for submission at the moment, are you able to once again share with us those details on the Home Affairs website or the email address where these submissions can actually be accepted?
The details of our email is ercp@dha.gov.za. ercp@dha.gov.za.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Council, thank you so much for joining us this evening and for shedding some light and information with us this evening regarding the possible reform that might be coming to South Africa. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Viewers at home, that was Advocate Sizani, who was talking to us about the possible reform that could be placed in South Africa when it comes to the electoral system for our National Assembly as well as the provincial legislatures. So he has provided us with a lot of information about the possible reform as well as the submissions that are open. But do let us know your thoughts on our social media platforms. What do you think about the reform? Do you think it's something that is good that's coming for South Africa? Do you think the changes will be big? Do you think they will be small? And how effective will they actually be? And regarding the accountability system, do you think they will be effective in terms of accountability as well? Let us know your thoughts on all our social media platforms. But on that note, viewers, it is time for us to head over to an ad break and we'll come right back.